across the whole of the UK that are empty and disused, why don't you invest in making them fit for purpose instead of blaming immigrants for all the problems?
I don't blame immigrants.
There's hundreds of migrants died recently in the Mediterranean trying to cross over from Syria and Libya, and they died because the government, to pander to UKIP's anti-immigrant rhetoric,
you can say it as much as you like. We're not anti-immigrant. You may repeat it as much as you like.
Because of your rhetoric,
I don't care what you say.
That people are dying in the Mediterranean.
Our party is not anti-immigrant, and you may continue with that line as much as you like, but it won't change the facts. Our party is not anti-immigrant. It's not anti-immigration. You may consistent with that. Look at the policy. Look what I've put into paper. Look at the manifesto. You can clearly see it's trying to create an equitable system for as many people as possible, those here in this country as well as those from abroad. You can say it as much as you like, but it just plainly is wrong.
Someone behind you, Stephen, waiting very patiently with a question.
The way I see it, the main problem that people see with immigration is migrant workers come to Britain and take British jobs. But often they do this by undercutting the wages paid to British people. Rather than demonising migrant workers, wouldn't the best way of preventing this be to actually put more pressure on immoral employers who allow the minimum wage to be undercut when they pay migrant workers?
OK, let's hear from the Conservative Party, who said no ifs, no buts, they would get immigration down and spectacularly failed to do so.
Well, Chris, if I can go back to the point that Daniel and Blessings made at the beginning.
As long as you answer mine afterwards.
I will answer your point. Don't worry about that. Look, I'm a second-generation immigrant. My parents came here from Kenya. It's a fantastic country. This is a country that took them in. So often the whole narrative about immigration gets lost in that it's often about sound bites. So many people come here because they want to contribute and they want to actually make the system better. I think the problem is with the narrative around immigration, and people do raise this on the doorstep, it is an issue. It does depend on the age group you're speaking to. But people do want to feel as though we do have control of our borders, and it's quite right that we do that. But often the narrative about this gets lost in the heat, and often there's so much heat and not enough light on this debate.
OK, and you were going to answer the point, I think, about...
The point is, we're a victim of our own success on this. We've created so many jobs as being within the European Union. In Yorkshire, for example, we've created more jobs than they have in France. And we have free movement of labour within the EU, and that is something we will put in front of the British public in terms of a referendum in 2017. But I think it's important to have an honest and open debate about immigration. I'll give you a simple point. One of the people in the video that you showed earlier, so much of the debate is about ignorance. I went to school about 8 miles from here, and for 3 years I was kept in a remedial class because the teachers thought I couldn't speak English, until one teacher spoke to me and said, "Paul, you can speak English." I said, "I can read it too." If it wasn't for that teacher, I wouldn't be an MP.
Emma Reynolds. The Conservatives don't have a monopoly on getting it wrong on immigration because Labour got it spectacularly wrong, of course, in 2004.
Well, as you'll have seen from the clip that you had of Ed Miliband has been clear that we've listened and that we've heard people's concerns about immigration. I do think we need a balanced and fair debate about this, and I do agree with the young man from Glasgow that there is a lot of scaremongering going on, and there is a big blame thing going on as well, which I find quite disgusting.
You're buying into it,
I don't think we are buying into it, because I do think I do think there is a way of approaching this issue in a sensitive way, in a fair and balanced way. We need a system that controls immigration from outside the EU, but we also need a fair system for migrants coming from within the EU. But I'm not going to sit here and say to you, I'm going to make false promises like the Conservative Party on the numbers. We're not going to do that. And I'm also not going to say that we're going to pull out of the European Union, because I think that would be bad for everybody sitting in this room, because it would threaten jobs and investors too.
Hi, my name's Sam, I'm 20 and I'm a student at the University of Birmingham. I would like to say I actually agree with what UKIP are saying. They're not actually against immigration, they're just against controlled immigration. They would like skilled workers to come into the country to actually contribute towards the NHS and the welfare system. They're not against immigrants. In fact, they're the only party who are actually saying we should have an equal allowance of immigrants from outside of the European Union. And as part of the EU,
absolutely.
How are we going to control immigration? Because we have an open doors policy. None of the other parties are actually accepting that and saying how they're going to control it.
All right. Let's see what you are saying online. The hashtag is Newsbeat, and you're chatting to Tina.
It is. Keep your messages coming in. Let's get a couple of comments. Lots of chat about immigration online. One from Gareth. If we leave the EU, we've been talking about the EU just now, we will find it harder to trade and cooperate as we do now with EU members. Hashtag Newsbeat. And a message from Dev Mystery. Immigration isn't the issue in this country. Discrimination is. So picking up on your point, but somebody with a different view. Stephen Woolfe, is UKIP exploiting people's fears about immigration? Your own leader, Nigel Farage, blamed migrants for traffic on the M4.
No, and I think what you saw with Nigel is he said at that particular point he was caught at a very wrong time. It wasn't something that he really meant by it. And sometimes politicians do say that, as do everything on this. But, you know, I think I am sad to think that still people think that we're trying to make exploitation of this, because at the end of the day, when you're looking at migration policy, and I'll be very clear, when I was asked would I be the immigration spokesman, I said no. I'll be the migration spokesman because, as the lady said early on, you've got to balance those who are in other countries who are losing people as well as those coming here. And that's the first point in trying to change the debate.
There's a whole body of research, the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, says that migrants actually put in more into the economy than they do taking out from services.
Well, actually, I can look at different rules on that and terms of research as well. First of all, the OECD has produced a report said that large-scale migration in the UK results in a lowering of wages. That was followed up by the European Union report, and even the UCL report that talked about the 20 billion that was supposed to be a benefit from those of the EU. If you look at the appendix in that same report, it said the cost of migration to this country is 98 billion to 154
what would you
billion.
Say, okay, on the subject of leaving the EU, what would you say to, you know, up to 1 million? We don't have exact figures because we don't have all the census figures from individual countries, but around 1 million Brits living abroad. What would you say to 300,000 people living in Spain?
Well, the point about that is twofold. First of all, it's not in our purview to try and control what the Spanish would do, but I would hope that they would follow the arguments that I've put forward, is that for those people who already come to this country and live here from the European Union would remain and have the opportunity to work and live here in the same way as they do. That's the fair and equitable thing to do, and that they would be offered. And secondly, you must understand that the vast majority of those actually in Europe are those who are retirees. So they're taking income and capital into those countries, which actually benefits them. And if you really want to look at a point, there are more people that go to Australia, the United States or Canada and move abroad there and work there, and they don't have to be in the European Union, than those who actually are in Europe.
All right, okay. Stephen, thank you very much. Let's have this guy here.
Hi, I'm Watson. I'm 22. I'm from Nottingham. A lot of the discussion so far seems to have been about a cap on numbers as opposed to a cap on quality. The question I wanted to sort of pose to the members here is, are we talking about a cap on how many are coming in? If there are 100 doctors sort of on our shorelines, as it's being made out that there are we letting 50% in, or are we saying, look, these guys are doctors, they can add to our economy, therefore we're going to let them in? A second point I'd like to make is that we have a large structural unemployment in this country with lower skilled workers or lower skilled jobs. And if there are workers that are prepared to come into this country from whatever country that may be, then we should welcome them with open arms. If they're there to fill a vacancy, and whether it be whatever their nationality is, I don't see why at the minute we're sort of arguing over whether they should be allowed in or not.
Amelia Womack, that's pretty much the Greens' policy, isn't it? Fairly much open house?
I mean, we don't actually believe in an open borders policy, but we don't believe in arbitrary figures as well. But I really want to bring up a lot of these points that have been made, because you need to take responsibility for the language that we're using around migration at the moment. That we've had such negative language that on the doorsteps we do continually hear. You open the door and the first thing that people say, well, it's all of the immigrants, isn't it, that's causing the problems. But when you actually break that down, it's clear that people are worried about things they should genuinely be worried about. Housing, for example. As a result of failure of building enough social housing, we are now in a housing crisis. The NHS, as due to lack of investment, then we have an NHS that is struggling. And things like jobs, but we've seen so many cuts to our public services and job losses that we cannot continue to blame immigrants for the failures of governments and the failures of government policy.
All right. Well, you mentioned The NHS there, Amelia Womack. Let's move on to that topic. It's one that Newsbeat listeners have told us is very important to them, the NHS, and your experience of it over the last 5 years.
I'm Hannah and I'm a sixth form student. The NHS has helped me a lot over the last kind of year. However, looking in the Conservatives' manifestos recently, I have seen that they want to take mental health a lot more seriously, like a physical illness, and they want to cut down like the waiting list. I personally had to wait 6 months to get help for my depression and anxiety, and within that time I was waiting on that waiting list with no support from anybody. I was told I had to wait for my turn, and who did I have to turn to? And you know, I had to get on with that myself. And I feel that, and I was allowed 4 sessions, and then basically they told me you have to go away then and just deal with it yourself. And I don't think that is appropriate, to be quite honest, and I want more to be done. But you're saying you want to change it, but how are you going to change that?
Paul Uppal, there's a letter by... There's a letter from 100 mental health professionals that you must have seen in today's Mirror that says we cannot continue to work under this intolerable stress as a result of cuts to our services.
Well, one of the things we are doing, we're setting up a fund, a £450 million fund, to address the issues specifically that we're talking about here. That will touch nearly 1 million people in terms of issues around depression and anxiety. And I think it's actually an important issue for us to raise as politicians. I think so often in the past we've not actually discussed this. It's time for an open and honest discussion about this, about how we can actually be quite candid. But money alone is not the issue. I know in my 5 years as an MP, if I speak very candidly, the number one issue, although it's never directly addressed to me, is often that a lot of my constituents come and see me because they're lonely, they're anxious, and sometimes they're depressed. And sometimes the resources we have aren't always there that they actually need. And I think it's actually having a bespoke service to meet their needs.
Chris. Norman, come back in a second. I just want to hear from this lady first.
On something Paul said, he spoke about people being anxious, spoke about people being depressed. So we're talking about mental health here. I want to know, sorry, my name's Beverly, I'm from YMCA Black Country Group.
Thank you.
I want to know which party is going to directly address mental health, who's going to start taking it serious, because physical health is a priority for the NHS. If someone comes and they're physically disabled, physically ill, we take it really seriously. But if it's mental health, we don't take it as seriously. And I want to know why that is and what the parties are going to do about it. I know Rod's going to be keen to
we should ask a health minister, shouldn't we? Yes. Norman Lamb was health minister in the coalition government.
Well, Hannah is absolutely right. How on earth can you justify the fact that if you have suspected cancer, you get an appointment with a specialist within 2 weeks? It's your right. If you have a first episode of psychosis or you have some other mental health problem, you have no such right. That is complete discrimination at the heart of the NHS, and it has to end. And the Liberal Democrats are totally committed to achieve equality for those suffering from mental ill health. We've secured £1.25 billion for the next 5 years for children and young people's mental health, but we have to have the same right to timely access to treatment for mental health as for any other condition. This discrimination has to end.
But you've been health minister, minister in this government, which is putting mental health professionals under intolerable stress and says we're at risk of becoming mentally unwell ourselves. You've had a go. And so you failed, haven't you?
No, Chris. What we have done is to introduce the first ever waiting time standards in mental health from this very month. So if you suffer...
Well, it doesn't sound like it's working out great.
They are just being introduced now. So the way the system works, when you have very strong, tough waiting time standards for physical health and nothing in mental health, it drives where the money goes. It means that mental health always loses out. The fact that we have now introduced the first ever waiting time standards in mental health, and I want to see them comprehensively introduced across mental health over the next 5 years, that will give us the chance to achieve genuine equality for those who suffer from mental ill health.
How many halfway houses are going to be reopened?
There is a moral and economic imperative that we do this.
OK, over there.
Hi, my name's Tamana. Hi. I'm 21 and I'm from Kent, and I'm a campaigner and an activist. I campaign on many issues such as mental health, NHS, and a lot of organisations such as Fixtures in Young Minds. I want to say something right now. I have people that I know suffer from mental health issues and etc., waiting times, waiting lists, referrals, etc. Recently, I had a friend that committed suicide, and he took his own life because he had no support and the services were not there for him at the right time when he really needed it. And I am sick to death of seeing young people our age not